I'm 34-year-old male, presently incarcerated. Greetings from Virginia. I'm writing to request any literature on military history or current modern warfare, any self-help books. I would greatly appreciate anything that would be sent. Thank you, and may you have a very peaceful day.
There's a profit motive behind incarcerating so many people. Now we're talking about mass incarceration.
Public education and the failure to fund it equitably sets up a condition where students in poor neighborhoods are more inclined to drop out and engage in criminal activities.
Mere words alone cannot cover my appreciation for the works of your organization. I hope everything is well and you continue to do good work.
I went in front of the Pardons Board. I told them I'm not here to ask for a second chance. I'm here to ask for a first chance.
Hi, my name's Tom. I've been with Books Through Bars now for just about 10 years. I've worked my way up the ladder as it was, so I'm considered a core volunteer. I keep coming back because, you know, I realize it makes me feel good and that I'm doing something that a lot of people appreciate that would not get the stuff that we send them if we wouldn't be here to do it. This space used to be occupied by a publishing company. They started getting letters from prisoners. I'm incarcerated, I don't have a lot of money, we don't have a good library. We're wondering if you have any books that you're going to be getting rid of or you can't sell, if you could send it to us. We probably get a stack of letters every single day about this thick. So what happens, sometimes more. What happens is we have a couple of people that'll open them, check them for money, which we like to see, but we get them ready for the people that are going to log it into our system. And these are the letters up here that are waiting to be logged into our system. After that, what happened is that because it was a more close-knit neighborhood, some of the people that lived around here started getting together and helping to send the books out, and from that, Books Through Bars grew out of. Said we have all sorts of different categories here. For instance, we have a very, very small, meager law section that a lot of people ask for. Vocational training books here. Our dictionary section is over here, and then through the rest of the library, you'll see different shelves for different things. This is the Spanish section, and then we have an African American section, and the rest of the stuff is downstairs. There are a couple of good examples, though, of why people write to us and ask for different books, because they can't find these in prisons anymore. Everybody has, all the professionals, all the people in the know say, education is the most valuable thing a person can get, both on the outside and then certainly on the inside, to reduce crime, to reduce recidivism.
Yeah, so I guess I've been at Books Through Bars first just as a volunteer. I live in the neighborhood. I live about 2 blocks away now, and I've been coming here since about mid-2016, I guess. I really like the immediacy of the work that we do here. So many things are great causes and good to be involved in, but as an individual, you're so separated from the impact of the work. And at Books Through Bars, you know, you pick up a letter and you read it, and you are sending somebody packages. You're sending somebody books that they asked for. You know, people have an image of what prison is and what prison is supposed to do. And I think that if people had more of a sense of what it actually is and what it's actually trying to do, you know, it's a deliberately dehumanizing system.
Most Americans perceive the American prison system as being one of fairness and justice, and I would argue it's the exact opposite. That the American prison system disproportionately affects certain populations, in particular people of color. So black people make up approximately 12% of the US population, but account for approximately 38% of the prison inmates. Additionally, America constitutes about 5% of the world population, but accounts for approximately 25% of the world's inmates.
You know, I think it's interesting that here we are in the United States, which is, arguably the most powerful country in the world, and yet, ironically, the best we can do to, so to say, address crime is to put people in cages. 2.2 million people incarcerated, the vast majority of whom are not in for violent offenses.
As a black woman, my grandfather was incarcerated. All of my uncles have been incarcerated. Many of my cousins has been incarcerated. My nephew, who's 16, was just arrested for the first time. And that's not to say that for each of their stories there wasn't some sense of wrongdoing, because perhaps that's a part of the story of mass incarceration. But the other part is that the neighborhoods that they live in, the places where they shop, they're more likely to be profiled, which means they're more likely to be picked up, which means they're more likely to be charged, and that means they're more likely to be convicted.
The war on drugs, right? Studies have shown that approximately the same percentage of every population either does or sells drugs. But yet certain communities are over-policed. Therefore, they are caught more than other people. So right now we're at Temple University and college campus. I guarantee right now as I'm having this conversation, certain students are doing drugs and selling drugs. But you don't have police kicking down dorm rooms to find these assailants. If the police were doing that, we'd have more college kids locked up.
And I'm sensitive to that systemic discrimination on a personal level. But I also understand that for black communities and brown communities, that when you get caught up in this system of having this record, I understand the consequences it has on your daily life, on your ability to be a member of your family, to be a member of your community, and your ability to create generational wealth, which I think are things that historically black and brown people have had a really difficult time in this country purposefully.
Black males are stigmatized by our society. It's been going on for 400 years, and now that stigmatization and that racialized body is filtered through a prison system as opposed to slavery, as opposed to segregation laws, etc.
Systemic racism is the idea that at every layer of governmental function, there's a purposeful design that creates gaps between how your social class is tied to your access. Systemic racism is like where in our society, in our institutions, our established governmental spaces, are there decisions being made that are inherently unfair and unequal and rooted in race?
Or are we creating a certain kind of system that benefits from locking people up? Now we're talking about mass incarceration. For every person that's locked up, someone makes $1. There's a profit motive behind incarcerating so many people.
What are prisons for? It's a very provocative question. It provokes all sorts of answers, and I think that some of the answers, unfortunately, are pretty ugly. The reality is, with 2 out of 3 people going back, if you see prison as a business, it's a business that's succeeding.
When you get locked up, you have to get a job. We have this fantasy that inmates just sit in their cell rooms and play basketball and play cards, etc. But in fact, they go to work every day, just like regular Americans. And in Greaterford, they make anywhere from 19 cents to 40 cents an hour. And these are private companies that are being run in these prisons. Everything from McDonald's to Victoria's Secrets. In other words, we have inmates that are literally making profit for private corporations. And one could easily make the case it's a form of modern-day slavery.
But the idea of making a profit off of caging people and stripping them of their rights and denying them their access to the things that make them human is the story of America, right? So I think we have to first start at like, did profits go down? And that's the first start of this story, is like, at the date of emancipation, when the 13th Amendment was signed by Abraham Lincoln, did that affect profit? And it did. So then the profits begin to go up, right? After that point, when it's decided that if you can incarcerate people, you can bring them back into this class of free labor. We've seen companies who can make a great profit off of everything from phones access to what you can buy in commissary, to your access to technology and your access to books, to how you communicate with your family. So yeah, I do think that there's a lot of money that is being made, and there are a lot of people who are comfortable with that much money being made. I think when we talk about mass media and pop culture, I think that mass incarceration has hit a new nerve because we have this class of athletes, of musicians, of artists, and to some extent politicians who understand the impacts of this kind of like purposeful manipulation to oppress people who have historically been purposefully oppressed. I think that now there's just a new kind of sense of obligation.
What is mass incarceration? What do you mean?
Unfortunately, America's number one at a lot of good things, but we're number one at the wrong thing when it comes to this. We're number one at incarcerating people.
We represent 5% of the world's population, 25% of its inmates.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
We have over 2 million people behind bars right now.
That's not an indicator that we want to be the leader.
We got to cut our prison population by like 80%. There's a lot of work that has to be done. That's one step.
The people in these prisons are deserving of our attention.
It's a fact that needs to be spoken. America's prisons are broken. It's a hard truth about incarceration. Prisons are needed for a civilized nation.
It's rare that you see wealthy people committing violent street crimes. So the question becomes, well, why is that? Are poor people natural-born criminals, or do we live in a society that constructs certain kinds of circumstances that lead to certain kinds of behaviors?
They may have grown up in some really rough environments, urban environments, for example, where some of the educational systems are really terrible. And so, you know, one of the things that I think about is people drop out, they abandon school. In my mind, in some ways, it's more like the school abandoned them.
I think there's an inherent link between the American educational system and mass incarceration. Generally speaking, if you live in a poor neighborhood, you get a poor education. If you get a poor education, you have less job possibilities. If you have less job possibilities, then most likely be encouraged to live a different kind of lifestyle, simply to survive.
You know, people drop out, they get into the life of the streets, and all that entails, and sometimes, you know, end up in prison. That's the school-to-prison pipeline.
The school-to-prison pipeline is a system in which youth, particularly youth of color, living in economically challenged neighborhoods, are funneled towards a life of incarceration as opposed to a life of education and intellectual expansion.
And because of the ways in which the school functions, how they handle discipline problems, how teachers are encouraged to talk to kids, the lack of resources, those kids are just set up for a different reality when it comes to like what's supposed to happen to them if they make it to graduation at all.
So if you live in a wealthy neighborhood and you're paying more taxes for your property, that means more money is going to education. If I live in a poor neighborhood and there's less tax money coming from property taxes, then there's less money for education. So it literally creates a stratification of education, where some people, simply based on the zip code they're born into, will have more opportunity in terms of education.
It's a heartbreaking shame that in a country that has so many resources, that greed and ignorance and racism have allowed us to say that there are millions of kids who we're not really concerned about giving them just the shot, just that first chance.
I said, you okay?
I'm hanging. No, I'm actually not okay. I'm just gonna say.
My name is Tyrone Works. I served 37 years in Graterford Prison. Like I said, I was sentenced to life without parole. And in Pennsylvania, once you sentence to life, you're there for the rest of your life. Right? At the time, I couldn't reconcile in my mind how I could be guilty to murder when I didn't kill anybody. This night we was trying to rob a drug dealer, but the drug dealer could not be found. Eventually, the decision was made to do another robbery, which I kind of backed out of and didn't want to be a part of, and I stayed in the car. And eventually, when the guys came back to the car, they announced that someone was shot. Now, I didn't really have the value of education because of an experience I had when I was in elementary school, where a teacher told me that I wasn't that smart because I wanted to be an astronomer when I was really younger, because I was really into that. I kind of internalized that message and told myself, like every day I looked in the mirror, I would say, I'm not that smart, so why should I even go to school? So I kind of lost the value. But, you know, I had an epiphany early on in my incarceration. where I went in and took a number of tests, and there was a guy who administered the test in prison who named Mr. Ernie Bello. He looked at my test scores, and my test scores were my English skills were second grade, my math skills were third grade, my comprehension skills were third grade. He said, but your IQ is above average. You can do academic work if you apply yourself. And so he signed me up for his evening class called Adult Basic Education. And I think that's where my life got on a different path. When I first came in, there was only 500 men and women serving life. When I walked out, it was 5,000 men and women serving life, so nobody gets out. One of the things I really hate is because people always come to me and say, wow, man, you came up after 37 years and you were so successful. But I don't want to be the poster boy for reentry, people who serve a long time in prison or serve any time in prison and make that transition back to society. A lot of guys struggle with that. A lot of people fail. My story is different than that. The biggest thing for me, as opposed to most people got out of prison, I had 2 jobs waiting for me. But that's not the story for most men and women who get out incarcerated. A lot of them are shunned, ostracized, isolated, dehumanized, and so they struggle with their transition. That's why it's important for the institutions, the Department of Corrections, that education should be provided while they're incarcerated, while people are incarcerated. And the sad part of it is, because of the school to prison pipeline, a lot of people who are incarcerated, especially when they're 24, 25, 30, 35, they don't see education as an option, So education is the key to one having a successful life. I like to tell people that when I went in front of the Pardons Board, I told them I'm not here to ask for a second chance. I'm here to ask for a first chance.
We have a lot that the folks, when they send in to us, can ask. Movie and TV, theater over here. We have a shelf here that specifically has prison issue books, so all the books on here have something to do with prison. This is our self-help section. This is there's things in here from cookbooks and nutrition to medicine to various diseases, and of course a fair amount of stuff that has to do with alcoholism and drug use. What my role is? Well, I like to say I have absolutely no responsibilities here whatsoever. I am what you might call middle management. I'm considered a core volunteer. We have 3 levels of volunteers here. We have the people that we call walk-ins. They come in on our packing sessions and just walk in and volunteer and help pick and pack the books. And then we have another level that's called core. That's those of us that keep coming back. We do some of the behind-the-scenes duties.
I enjoy it as a way to build connections with folks who are on the inside, who are incarcerated.
When you're picking books for the inmates, you feel like you're shopping for a friend, and it's like this really fulfilling feeling where you're like, ooh, they're gonna like this book, and you just feel really good because it's just like an unequivocal good, because who doesn't like receiving presents?
People do send a lot of art. They send art on the outside of envelopes. Sometimes people very frequently ask for art books, and we rarely have them in stock, but when we have them, they send them. And sometimes people send back art that they've made using the books that we've sent, which is really great.
We get cards all the time too. We get Mother's Day cards, we get Easter cards, we get Christmas cards from several of the inmates on a block might sign the same card and send that in to us and say, hey, great work, God bless you, whatever the case may be, please keep it up. We all appreciate it, stuff like that.
I think that oftentimes people when they come out of prison and talking to people who have been incarcerated and talking to people who are currently incarcerated, there isn't a sense of like, what will come next for me?
I think education is a silver bullet for crime prevention at all stages. It creates a situation that people are focused on something positive.
If we can convince the federal government that there has to be some money set aside to give people access to higher education while their people are incarcerated, just so we can set them up for meaningful success, we won't see real change. But I think we can see real change. We just have to take new approaches.
There are lots of studies that indicate that higher education in the lives of people who are incarcerated has an incredible effect in terms of lowering recidivism rates. They come to this class, and sometimes for the first time ever, they get in touch with, wow, I'm kind of smart.
Well, what kind of people do you want to have coming back out into your communities? Do you want to have people who are not in any way, shape, or form hopeful of any kind of a change in their circumstances that got them into prison to begin with? If we can keep people focused on a positive goal, then they're less likely to go out and rob someone's house.
It does things for people's sense of self that is like nothing I have ever seen. It's almost like it puts people on a whole new trajectory in terms of how they understand themselves, not just in terms of their ability to learn, but also in terms of leadership potential, in terms of getting in touch with one's voice.
Education expands our minds, it expands our imaginations, it can potentially give us an expanded self-concept, better self-esteem, equip us with the skills to think critically about ourselves, each other, and the world around us. Education benefits everyone, right? So granting prisoners the ability to reflect upon their experience, to critically engage our society, our political system, other human beings, right, I think improves their lives, but then also improves the lives of everyone else.
Different kinds of programs cropping up that are addressing the needs and interests of people who are incarcerated.
I found Books Through Bars, volunteered the first time, and it was a game changer. It was a sweet, sad day to be able to be holding a letter. And for me, there was something almost quasi-spiritual about having a physical connection with someone else's circumstance that stuck with me.
People get an image of what prison is from social media and cultural depictions, and I think that the image that they get of what it's like and what the people who are inside are like, and what the system is deliberately trying to do to them, is going to be far different after they've been here with us and actually have read some of these letters than what it was before.
For programs to kind of come in, especially to come in from the outside, and to basically say, you know, we want to make this available to you because we believe you're worth it. That makes a huge difference to people, a huge difference.
Books Through Bars applies an alternative model of social change, more of a model of direct action, that we are seeking to directly intervene into the problem right now. That yes, we are willing to work with political leaders, but we're going to cut out the middleman, so to speak, and directly send books through prisoners, right? That in itself is a form of social change.
And what's been written to the organization, the letters I've read, there is a deep sense of gratitude, a deep sense of appreciation for people who either give books or give time to hear their needs and to try to respond to their needs.
Books Through Bars treats those who are locked up as human beings, and recognizes that every human being has the right, the inherent right, to expand his or her mind.
Yeah, I think Books Through Bars in the 30 years, that maybe they're at 31 years now, of existence have done is affirmed humanity. But I think beyond that, I think what they give people is what books have always given people, which is a sense of the wider world and of possibilities and of options and of novelty. And I think that idea of being made human for a moment while you hold, text is one of the most beautiful things about what they deliver to the community that they serve all across the country.
We're getting these people what they want. And getting that feedback from them, that gives us the energy to keep going. That lets us know these folks are in there. They really do appreciate it. We're meeting our goal of helping them in some way. And so when we get this back, it's just, okay, we've got to keep going. We've got to keep getting these people what they want because it's working.